Salute, sir, and peace and blessings to all my brothers and sisters in the struggle. What I wanted to talk about right now is something near and dear to my heart, and that's, who we are as human beings and, or as men, and why it's so hard for us to get it together as men, all right, to make the contributions to the world and to humanity that we as men need to make as responsible, productive members of the global community that we belong to. Yeah. All right. What is our birthright as human beings, right? And it's pretty deep, okay? And I'm gonna, like, I like books, right? And I'm gonna be reading from a book that talks about, what it means to be a man. And it talks about patriarchal male and boy psychology and why boy psychology is dominant in the world today. The wounded boy, or boys masquerading as men. And the book is King, Warrior, Magician, and Lover by Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette. One of my favorites, right? Because it deals with the male archetypes, all right? The king, the warrior, the magician, and the lover, right? The magician pretty much represents the prophet or the saint or the mystic. The wise man, the scientist, the doctor, the scholar. That's one of the archetypes that we can tap into as individual males, right? The king, who is the earthly representation of the true king, or for the female queen of the universe, all right? That all of us can tap into these archetypal programs that's embedded in us, the deep structures of the human psyche, all right? Like all of those things we have access to. To be empowered and a productive leader or member of the community, we need to be able to access these archetypal forces and bring them into being in our lives, right? The warrior, what are the attributes of the warrior? The lover, what are the attributes of the lover? Compassion, mercy, empathy. Those qualities manifest themselves from that place. All right? The deep structures that we're talking about, referred to as archetypal structures. Nobody has a monopoly on prophethood. Okay? It's something that is embedded into us. Nobody has a monopoly on courage and strength. That's something that is our birthright as human beings. Nobody, or no one person, group, or individual has a monopoly on wisdom, learning, intellect. All right? That's our natural birthright, given to us by the Supreme Being. Okay? That we have access to that, every single one of us. Some of us are more in line with those forces than others. All right? Some of us are closer to the mark. Okay? Hey, we might miss the mark from time to time, but most of the time we find our ways right back to the path, the straight path. We might stray, but it's almost like we're drawn right back to it magnetically. All right? And so let me get to work here on the book. It says we look at family systems and see the breakdown of the traditional family. More and more families display a sorry fact of disappearing father, which disappearance through either emotional or physical abandonment or both wreak a psychological devastation on the children of both sexes. The weak or absent father cripples both his daughter's and his son's ability to achieve their own gender identity and to relate in an intimate and positive way with members of both their own sex and the opposite sex. That says a lot for P. Diddy, all right? And a lot of the other, men acting out immaturely in their relationships with members of the same sex and the opposite sex, all right? Because they didn't have that example of what a truly mature masculine human being is supposed to be, all right? They had either a weak representation of that in their lives, all right, or an immature example of that in their lives, and they weren't able to, mirror that in themselves. But it is our belief and experience that we can't just point in any simple way to the disintegration of modern family systems, important as this is, to explain the crisis in masculinity. We have to look at two other factors that underlie this very disintegration. First, we need to take very seriously the disappearance of ritual processes for initiating boys into manhood. The wise elder is missing. Well, not completely, all right? There are wise elders in the world, all over the world, in fact, all right? It's just that you need to look hard to find them. In traditional societies, there are standard definitions of what makes up what we call boy psychology and man psychology. This can be seen clearly in the tribal societies that have come under careful scrutiny of such noted anthropologists as Arnold van Nepp and Victor Turner. There are careful constructed rituals for helping the boys of the tribe make the transition to manhood. Okay? Like, there are a lot of things that modern society have strayed away from that is vital, all right, to the construction of the mature masculine self. Okay? And ritual process is the missing ingredient. The ritual elders, all right, are the missing ingredients. What happens to a society if the ritual process by which these identities are formed become discredited? In the case of men, there are many who either had no initiation into manhood or who had pseudo-initiations that failed to evoke the needed transition into adulthood. We get the dominance of boy psychology. Boy psychology is everywhere around us, and it marks are easy to see. Among them are the abusive and violent acting out behavior against others, both men and women, passivity and weakness. The inability to act effectively and creatively in one's own life and to engender life and creativity in others, both men and women. And often an oscillation between the two, abuse and weakness, abuse and weakness, all right? Along with the breakdown of meaningful ritual process of masculine initiation, a second factor seems to be contributing to the dissolution of mature masculine identity. This fact shows to us by one strain of feminist critique is called patriarchy. Patriarchy is the social and cultural organization that has ruled our Western world and much of the rest of the world from at least the second millennium BCE to the present. Feminists have seen how male dominance in patriarchy has been oppressive and abusive of the feminine. Like, you can't deny that, P. Diddy. And some of you, I'm not gonna go to pointing any fingers right now, but P. Diddy is just the one that's right now in our face, right? And of both the so-called female characteristics and virtues in actual women themselves. In their radical critique of patriarchy, some feminists conclude that masculinity in its roots is essentially abusive. Wrong. And that connection with eros, with love, relatedness, and gentleness comes only from the feminine side of the human equation. Now, like if we think of the human being as like, having both those characteristics within themselves, then it's not something that is denied to men. All right? Because both the male and the female has those attributes within themselves. We'll get to that a little later. As useful as some of these insights have been to the cause of both feminine and masculine liberation from patriarchal stereotypes, we believe there are serious problems with this perspective. In our view, patriarchy is not the expression of deep and rooted masculinity. For truly deep and rooted masculinity is not abusive. Patriarchy is the expression of immature masculinity. It is the expression of boy psychology and, in part, the shadow or crazy side of masculinity. All right? I believe that there's some truth to that. It says the patriarchal male does not welcome the full masculine development of his sons or his male subordinates any more than he welcomes the full development of his daughters or his female employees. This is the story of the superior at the office who can't stand it that we are as good as we are. How often we are envied, hated, and attacked in direct and passive-aggressive ways, even as we seek to unfold who we really are in all our beauty, maturity, creativity, and generativity. The more beautiful, competent, and creative we become, the more we seem to invite the hostility of our superiors or even our peers. Like, listen, man, I can see that in my job, all right? In how, like, black managers are overlooked and, some of the females who are really good at their jobs are passed over for promotions and, just ignored, their contributions ignored to the company. Like, that's the reality, okay? That's the boy psychology coming out in patriarchy. White patriarchy. White racist, white supremacist patriarchy, okay? Like, I love this book. It's right on point. Patriarchy expresses what we're calling boy psychology, deep. And, it's so deep that, like, I can't really treat the subject here properly as it should be treated. But that's something that we've learned in SOA that is vital to the full development of the male and the female in finding cohesion and unity within the self so that we can be more responsive to the needs of our families and our communities and the world at large. With that, I want to say salute, sir, and peace and blessings to one and all.